Got it.
Listen, I didn't really get to finish yesterday's lecture, so I'm going to start out with the end of chapter 5, 5.3.
Are we doing 5.4?
We're not doing 5.4. You can just skip 5.4. They took a lot of stuff off the AP exam because a lot of teachers were complaining they couldn't finish the book. So
computers can do that?
we won't worry about 5.4. I just wanted to show you a few of these videos of bulk transport, which are good videos that you didn't get to see.
Should I watch the video?
Huh? Yeah, you can point it. Just whatever you think's important, you follow. So is this what still confuses y'all, the cells?
I just thought when you would place something in a hypotonic, I guess how you say it, solution, like the solution would take a lot of water.
No, hypotonic means it has a lot of water in the solution.
Okay.
And so it's going to move elsewhere. Yes?
So wait, does tonic, when you're saying hyper, does that refer to the mixture or the water?
It refers to hypertonic. Yeah, it refers to the water. No, yeah, it refers to the mixture.
Okay, so hyper means a lot and hypo means not a lot?
Hyper means a lot. And tonic, I guess, is referring to the solute. A lot of solute. Hypertonic solution has a lot of solute.
Why does the animal cell burst with the plant cell?
Because the plant cell has a tough cellulose cell wall around it that won't allow it to burst.
Is that why when you overwater something?
What's that?
No matter how big you get it.
Yeah, it'll never burst.
Does it stretch?
It stretches, but it doesn't burst. What were you saying?
Is that like when you overwater something?
Yeah, if you put a lot of water in a plant, the plant will stand really stiff because every cell is kind of expanding.
So hypotonic has more water on the outside of the cell and more solution in the inside?
If a cell is put in a hypotonic solution, the word refers to the solution itself. Don't worry about the cell, just worry about the solution. If the solution is hypotonic, it's got a lot of water in it. If the solution is hypertonic, it doesn't have much water in it. So let's take a cell and put it in a hypotonic solution. That's like pure water. What's going to happen? Water's going to rush into the cell.
So
it moves towards the salt.
Yeah, the water always moves toward areas where there's less water. So this is showing a cell placed in a hypotonic solution. Water will rush in.
And solvent is where you put the solvent.
Yes.
Solvent would be water, and then the solute.
Solvent is water, solute is sugar or salt or whatever dissolves in it. Other questions about movement of water in cells? Again, that's our lab, Friday, Monday, and Tuesday. We're in the lab working on this. So it's good to have a good understanding going into the lab. Let's see some bulk transport.
So is that like all osmosis?
Osmosis is movement of water. That's correct. Let me ask you this. Why not water your plants with salt water? There's a good reason.
Because
Shrivel.
Salt in the water. There's more salt in that water, so the water will actually leave the plant and go into the salt.
That's exactly what would happen. If you water your plants with salt water, try this the next time your folks go out of town. Bring some salt water and water all their plants with salt water. The salt water will get into the soil, and the plant itself has more water in it than the salt water does. So water will rush out of the plant and into the roots where you put the water. And it'll shrivel up and die. This is the same reason why you can't drink salt water if you're lost at sea. The water will rush out of your cells and into your stomach and intestines where the salt water is. instead of reverse. And you'll dry up and die. They'll find you on your little raft all shriveled up. Terrible way to go. Oh, we saw this one already. Remember this one? Exocytosis. This is probably the best video showing it. A little bubble comes out of the Golgi and the substance is released. Here we take in some large particles. What's this called?
Endocytosis.
What type of endocytosis?
Phagocytosis.
This is phagocytosis. Phagocytosis. Huh? You like that? You like phagocytosis? We saw that one. That wasn't that great. Oh, here's a Paramecium. What's he up to?
Protists, such as Paramecium, sweep food particles into their gullet, trapping the particles in a food vacuole. Digestion takes place within the food vacuole, and the products of digestion pass through the membrane of the food vacuole. Finally, the food vacuole merges with the plasma membrane, expelling waste products into the environment.
That was awful. There's the expelling of waste products. That's like going to the bathroom with Paramecium.
In phagocytosis, phagocytes are attracted to the area of invasion by chemical products of the microorganism, phospholipids released by injured mammalian cells, or by components of the complement system. The phagocyte moves into the area of invasion and then attaches to the microorganism. The attachment is mediated by a variety of surface receptors, including antibody, lipopolysaccharide, and complement receptors. For example, the C3b component of complement coats bacteria or other particles and then binds to C3b receptors on the phagocyte. This process of coating to enhance phagocytosis is called opsonization. The microorganism is then engulfed by the phagocyte into a vacuole known as a phagosome. Vesicles in the cytoplasm called lysosomes fuse with the phagosome, releasing digestive enzymes such as lysozyme and proteases into the phagosome. The structure resulting from this fusion is called a phagolysosome. Inside the phagolysosome, microorganisms are killed and digested. Finally, the digested contents of the phagolysosome are eliminated from the phagocyte by exocytosis.
That's how your white blood cells kill things. Wasn't that good? You getting all this, Sarah? You don't sound too interested in phagocytosis.
Phagocytosis, which means cell eating, is a form of endocytosis. A cell such as a phagocyte engulfs surrounding material, forming vesicles called phagosomes, derived from the plasma membrane. Phagosomes merge with vesicles called primary lysosomes that contain digestive enzymes, forming secondary lysosomes. Digestion takes place within the secondary lysosomes.
Okay. I guess we get the idea. Pinocytosis is taking in small particles from the environment. Often they're water droplets.
Pinocytosis, which means cell drinking, is a form of endocytosis. A cell brings in droplets of the environment by pinching them off with the plasma membrane. The pinocytic vesicles break away from the membrane and move to the cell's interior.
So it can take in a lot of water that way. Notice the plasma membrane will be getting slightly smaller while doing this. The cell has a way of making more membrane if it wants to.
Are we going to learn about that?
We already did with the Golgi apparatus and such.
No.
That's what goes on there. We didn't really talk too much about it.
Cells also use energy to transfer materials in bulk, but this time by forming membranous sacs that hold their contents under wraps. In a process called endocytosis, part of the surface membrane encloses the material, forming a sac which brings the contents into the cell's interior. In the opposite process, called exocytosis, the sac moves through the cytoplasm to the membrane, fuses with it, then releases the contents.
Oh, that was cool. I like the music. Finally, there's this process called receptor-mediated endocytosis, where there are little proteins that receive a signal. Little solute molecules will stick to the proteins. The proteins sit on the surface here. The solute molecules stick to them. And then after the solute molecules bind with the receptor protein, the whole thing pinches inward. So it's called receptor-mediated endocytosis because the receptor proteins are helping the endocytosis. Receptor-mediated.
The substances used as fuel by single-celled organisms include...
Oh, here we go.
If the material is a liquid, it is called pinocytosis. Some types of molecules, such as low-density lipoproteins, LDLs, are transported across the plasma membrane by receptor-mediated endocytosis. These molecules first bind to specific receptors embedded in the plasma membrane. The receptor molecules are concentrated in an indented pit coated by the protein clathrin. When sufficient target molecules accumulate in the coated pit, the pit deepens, seals, and is incorporated into the cell as a coated vesicle. Exocytosis is the reverse of endocytosis. This process results in the discharge of materials from...
What's the protein called?
Protein is called clathrin that coats the pit. I don't know if that's in your book or not.
So what happens to that protein when it gets to wherever it needs to be?
What happens to the clathrin?
Yes.
I don't know.
Exocytosis is the...
I don't know.
Is the membrane like recreated?
I don't know. That's a higher class than I teach. Take that second or third year bio students learn all that stuff. I'm sure I learned it in college. Quickly forgot about it when the next football game came around. Okay. We good with this? All okay? All right, let's go on to the next chapter.
In this house, we obey the laws of thermodynamics.
Who's that?
In this house, we obey the laws of thermodynamics.
Bart was traveling to another dimension and it upset Homer. Okay, so this chapter 6 talks about energy. And the flow of energy is important in cells and in life. Most of the energy that runs organisms comes from the sun. And sun shines down on plants, and plants absorb the sunlight and make food out of it. That's called photosynthesis. You ever heard of that before? Jordan, you with me? Can't be sleeping during this stuff. This stuff is not easy. You know? I always wonder about like a brain surgeon when they're learning to do their brain surgery. You think any of them are sleeping during class? And if so, that might be important. You know, the stuff they're missing. I always wonder about that. Anyway. This is not brain surgery, so I guess you can afford it a little bit. The leaves absorb the sunlight and take in carbon dioxide and water and make food. So basically, some of the energy is trapped to build these food molecules. And the plant gets bigger and bigger as it stores more of the food and grows. And then the plant can be eaten by the animal. This is a moose, I guess. He's eating, is that a moose? Is that what that is? Yeah. He's eating the leaves. And some of the energy goes into him, and some of the food goes into him, and then he gets bigger over time. So really, the sun's energy is passed along from organism to organism. And really, if you feel the heat coming off your body, and I'm running around talking, it all uses energy, everything I'm doing up here, everything you do, that energy originally came from the sun. So, and eventually it'll all go back to the atmosphere as heat as we burn it up, and you can feel your body temperature. The reason why you're warm is because you're burning this fuel. That's the sun's heat coming out much later. It was originally trapped by some plant, and it ended up in you, and now it goes back out as heat. And that's kind of cool to me. That it's kind of a delay. The heat is just kind of, the energy is just kind of moving through the organisms. It's kind of like, if you think of a planet that's dead, that has no life, something like the moon. The sun hits it, and the energy just heats up the rock a little bit, and then comes back out. But on Earth, where we have living things, the energy is captured and slowly moves through the bodies of these living things, letting them run around and do their things, their little lives, but eventually all the energy goes back after it's used by the organisms. So all the organisms running around on Earth and doing their thing, it's all from the energy of the sun. And that's a neat idea to me. Whenever I see some kid running down the hall, I go, look at the sun doing its thing. There goes some little sun energy. And that amuses me. Whenever I watch football teams playing and the guy runs and tackles, look at what the sun did there. Maybe you can start thinking that way. And then you'll know what it's like to be me.
It's a rainbow.
Incredible. So energy, food molecules, carbohydrates go into cells like a muscle cell, and the muscle is able to do something. And every time energy is transferred from one thing to another, from one form to another, some of it is lost as heat. This is why your car engine gets so hot. You're taking energy that's in the gasoline and transferring it to the movement of the tires, but a lot of it gets lost as heat. And the heat comes out when you're trying to transfer that energy. Usually, energy transfer is not very efficient. Your car it runs at about 10% efficiency, transferring the energy from gasoline to movement of the car. The other 90% is lost as heat. Your cells are more efficient than that. Your cells are about 35% efficient and don't lose nearly as much to heat, but still most of it is lost to heat. There's no such thing as 100% efficient transformation. That's one of Newton's laws. Energy can pass from one thing to another. I'm sorry, that's not Newton's laws. It's one of the laws of thermodynamics. Energy can go from one thing to another, but with every transfer, some is lost as heat.
Is that why you can't make a machine that like moves forever?
You cannot make a perpetual motion machine. That's correct. Because some will be lost as heat. There's no way to get a perfect energy transfer. Here's glucose, the molecule glucose, C6H12O6 on the left. And here's what it's made up of. Carbon dioxide and water on the right. Which to you looks more organized? The molecule on the left or the molecule on the right?
Glucose.
To the right.
More organized over here?
No, to the left.
More organized over here.
To the
To the
right.
left, to the left.
Left.
Everything you own in a box to the left.
in the closet. That's my stuff.
Why to the left? Why not to the right? I don't know. Anyway, this molecule is more organized, and it takes energy to organize anything. It takes energy to organize my desk. I have to put energy into it. And things become more disorganized with time. Over a period of time, my desk will become dirty again. And then I put energy into it to organize it. So you have to put energy into something to organize it. And there's a word you probably should have learned in chemistry called entropy. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
Entropy is disorganization. Entropy is freedom of motion. And this has a lot of entropy over here. There's a lot of freedom of motion, entropy, in these molecules. There's less freedom of motion over here in these molecules, less entropy, because the molecules are all arranged in a certain pattern, and that requires energy to
Why does it say less stable entropy?
I don't know. That's a weird way of writing it. We would say that this has less entropy. I guess stability.
The tighter you compact something.
This should say less entropy, and this should say more entropy.
Is less entropy more organized?
Less
No, it
entropy
says
is more organized. More entropy is more disorganized. Entropy is the amount of disorganization. Have you all ever heard that term before? Yeah.
How is it more organized but less stable?
Well, things want to move toward a state of disorder. So, this molecule wants to go here. So we say that it's not stable. It'll come apart if given the opportunity. And the opportunity often comes through enzymes. Enzymes can kind of take things apart. And so if we move from this to this, we release a lot of energy. That's the energy. That's the arrow going up that says energy. When we go from here to here, we break a lot of bonds and energy comes flying off. If we want to go the opposite direction from here to here, we have to use a lot of energy. Energy would have to be input. And you would have to draw an arrow from energy down to this arrow going this way if you wanted to go backwards. Have y'all seen arrows coming off of other arrows? You should have seen that in chemistry and kind of understand what that means. Yeah.
Wait, are the noble gases like really organized but unstable?
The noble gases, since they have a perfect electron configuration, they don't want to bond with anything.
Isn't that organized though?
That's not really organized because they have a lot of freedom of motion.
Okay.
They're not bound together in a molecule. They're free, so it's not organized. They have lots of things.
But it's considered unstable because it like at any second it kind of wants to break up. Like it's kind of
a noble gas?
No, I mean one of those things.
Yes, that's why you consider it unstable.
And it would like
because it will come apart and release a lot of energy if it could.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So glucose is a good source of energy for our cells. You put that thing in a mitochondrion, the mitochondrion has enzymes that will break it up and all that energy will be released, you see? And then that energy can be used by the cell. Here we have another case. We got an unequal distribution of hydrogen ions. We got a lot of hydrogen ions over here. We don't have any up there. What's hydrogen going to want to do if it can do it?
Leave.
It's going to want to diffuse or move out. Now, since it's a charged ion, it can't get through the membrane. Anything charged can't get through the membrane. But it can go through this channel. And so the hydrogen will go through the channel until you have an equal distribution on both sides.
Did you say they move to places of disorder? Or what, try to become disordered?
They will try to become disordered, yeah.
All molecules?
All molecules, all anything. Let me give you an example.
No, I thought he just took a hydrogen with a water bill.
Let me give you an example. Organized? Yes or no?
Yes.
Stack of papers organized?
Don't drop them.
Okay. They moved to disorder, didn't they? Everything wants to move to disorder. It didn't want to stay together. You notice it kind of tried to in the middle of the air. But then at the very end it broke up. The first time I ever did that demonstration, they all stayed together and they landed together in a perfect stack. And I just kind of stared at it, and the students are going, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Try that again." Yes, everything tends to move to disorder if given a chance. And these, if they're all on one side, that's kind of orderly. They want to move to more disorder, spread out. Just like the papers did. They want to get spread out.
Why?
Because that's the state of the universe. Everything tends to spread out. A bunch of ping pong balls in a room, you open the door, guess what happens? They go out the door. They want to spread out. Molecules are always moving.
So
imagine if I have a bunch of molecules in one little area and they're all moving. They're going to bump against one another and start flying off in every direction if given the chance. So all you got to do is release those molecules and they'll spread out.
So why don't we just fly apart?
Because we're constantly inputting energy into our body to keep from doing that.
So if we start a death rule,
you'll come apart. Your cells will come apart if they don't have a constant input of energy.
Oh, so
and that's why you eat.
Okay.
That's for the input of energy.
So
Good thinking.
If you stopped eating or if you just died, that would.
Your cells would all come apart. Yeah, you'd start decaying. Yeah, absolutely. That's if cells don't have that constant energy input, they can't repair any damage to themselves. Their membranes break apart, stuff comes out of them, and the decay begins.
Okay,
Yes.
so input of energy is kind of like what balances out the natural tendency to fall apart.
You're all over it, Cole. You are all over it. That's exactly.
Okay.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I probably could have said it a little bit better. Yeah.
Wait, what is it?
Say it again, Cole.
Okay, so input of energy counters the natural tendency for things to fall apart in nature.
That's what life is all about.
Why
Inputting energy to keep your organization. That's what separates us from a rock.
Exactly. Why doesn't a rock fall apart?
It's got little bonds holding the pieces of it together, but if those bonds, there was an original input of energy
To make the rock
a long time ago to bring the rock together, and it just hasn't fallen apart yet. But given enough time, it will. Even a rock will fall apart on its own, given enough time. It might take billions of years or trillions of years, but those bonds will break and it'll come apart.
Cool.
And the original input of energy that built that rock was probably when the Earth formed. There's a lot of energy went into that. Even protons decay over time, trillions of years. We learn more about that in astronomy.
So
if you're interested in that kind of stuff, take astronomy.
Will everything eventually just fall apart?
Everything eventually will fall apart and the universe will be a black place with nothing in it.
That's crazy.
Hundreds of trillions of years in the future. That's what we have to look forward to. Yes? Cole?
Okay, so why, there's no matter in space, right? I mean, space is just nothing, right?
There's a few atoms floating around. Yeah.
Okay, so basically what a natural tendency would be was just a whole bunch of atoms floating around everywhere.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah. That's what will eventually happen.
But
Long in
that's,
the future. What's
so
that?
that's kind of what space
Yes.
is, kind of.
Mostly, yeah.
Okay.
Mostly.
Do you think they'll reform after?
Well, now you're getting into cosmology, which is, who knows? I mean, it might. Maybe there's some law that'll bring everything back together. You ever heard of the Big Bang? The universe is expanding? Maybe one day there'll be a big shrink where everything comes back together.
But why would
Ooh, that's cosmology.
Visual.
But why would it form into a ball like that? Like all the matter in the world. Isn't that kind of orderly?
Big questions that
Okay.
I can't really answer.
Okay.
This desk kind of like keeps poking. Like the screws are
It's
undone.
sticking you?
The screws are undone.
Gosh, I hate that desk.
I know.
Let me talk a little
Hurt.
bit about ATP. I'm trying to fix it for you, but I can't do it right now. ATP is a molecule that's used in cells. It's basically a nucleotide. Remember a nucleotide? What were the three parts of a nucleotide? Do you remember that?
Pentose,
Phosphate.
phosphate.
I don't know what y'all are saying. Sugar, phosphate, nitrogen base. And ATP is basically a nucleotide that has 3 phosphates instead of 1. Sugar, 3 phosphates, nitrogen base. And ATP is the energy carrying molecule in a cell. In other words, what a cell will do, what an organelle like the mitochondrion will do, is break down glucose. Glucose is broken apart and energy comes out of it. And some of the energy is used to put one of the phosphates onto the other two phosphates. So now you have this molecule called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It's got 3 phosphates. And it took some energy to put that last phosphate on. So there's energy in that bond right there between the last 2 phosphates. There's some energy there. And this ATP molecule can travel around the cell, la 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 la, and go somewhere in the cell and break its bond. And when it does that, energy comes flying out of it and can be used by the cell to do something. Like to move one of those little arms on the vesicle-carrying motor molecules called kinesin.
What makes it break its bond?
A special enzyme that breaks the bond that's on the structure, like on the little arms that move the vesicle. There's an enzyme that will break that bond. And when that happens, some of the energy comes out and causes one of those arms to move. And so when you have one of those vesicles doing like this, every movement uses an ATP. And after the ATP is broken apart, it's not called ATP anymore. You know what it's called?
ADP.
It's called ADP plus P, or P plus ADP. There's the P, the phosphorus. There's the ADP, adenosine diphosphate, because it has 2 phosphates. And you know what will happen to these 2 things? They'll go back to the mitochondrion, and the mitochondrion will put them back together.
ATP.
Now it's ATP again, and it can travel somewhere in the cell and do its thing. Read 6.2. I'm going to come back to 6.6.